This is the part of the story when we start really getting into the mindset side of things. It's we're not just being dumb kids anymore, having the time of our life and finding early success in business anymore. We are really starting to get into, what kind of man we want to be. And the next chapter in the book, chapter 5, you must suffer. The basic idea that that I go into in this chapter is that success is not a measure of your achievements, but a measure of what you have suffered through. And instantly I think of Hoani's journey through, well, basically to hell and back, and probably to hell and back over and over again for years with your cancer. Tell us about that, man.
Yeah, sure. So I guess 2022, mid-2022, I think it was around June or July. So just to paint a bit of a picture, I was quite literally at the peak of my physical fitness. At that point in time, I was 34 years old, 35 maybe. And I had, for the 4 years up to this point, I was heavy into cycling. I did quite a lot of, not ultra marathon running, but half marathons, 10Ks were frequent aspects of my training regime. And one of the reasons why I actually started getting into endurance fitness and endurance sports was to achieve a goal that I had, which was to compete. I say compete, but just complete.
To perform well.
Perform above average in at an Olympic triathlon.
Yep.
So I think everyone, or most, not most, but some men will get to a point in their lives where they feel like there's still
we need to do something.
We need to
accomplish something.
There's a bit left in the in the system, and you want to kind of test yourself and your physical abilities before it becomes maybe before it gets too late in life.
Yeah. And
I was around 30 when I started feeling that I needed to be more active and I needed to kind of test my grit. And so from 30, I started cycling, started long distance cycling, started entering kind of competitions, and I really became passionate about it as a hobby and as a sport and as a source of health and fitness. Similarly to you and your running, I think I came to the same kind of crossroads and found that there was something that I felt that I could do better, and something that helped me test my grit. And so I think it was March of 2022, I had completed my goal, and I'd completed an Olympic try, and I completed it under 3 hours, which was my goal.
I didn't know that. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it was it was better than I had anticipated, but it was kind of where I was hoping to land, and it was great. I felt, like I said, I was at the peak of my physical fitness. I think it would have been a couple of months after that, I had run the Gold Coast Half Marathon.
Mm-hmm.
And, again, felt fine, felt good, felt great. I quite often would also go out on overnight hikes. We live in southeast Queensland, and we're surrounded by beautiful national parks. And I frequently would go to Mount Barney and climb Mount Barney. So Mount Barney is the tallest point in southeast Queensland. It's the tallest mountain. And it's a really challenging but rewarding climb. And so, I would kind of get everything that I needed to survive for a couple of nights, put it in a backpack, and just go bush.
By yourself?
By myself, yeah. I'd often go solo because I found it hard to find people who would want to come with me.
Oh, you want to come and climb up a mountain and just camp overnight for a couple of nights and then just climb back down?
There's a couple of barriers to entry to that request,
yes.
So that's fine. And I kind of like the idea of just getting away and, again, testing my ability to look after myself and take care of myself and, have my wits about me in what is essentially, unpredictable Mother Nature.
Yeah.
And
Mother Nature is merciless, especially in Australia. Every animal wants to kill you in this country.
I mean, there's that, and Mount Barney has a microclimate, so the weather changes quite rapidly there. So, climbing any kind of rock face in the wet is pretty fucking scary.
Yeah.
This I suppose paints the picture of where I was at in my life in terms of being
you were going pretty good. You were feeling good. You were fit, healthy. Everything's good. Everything's great.
Everything's good. I had a beautiful young family. I got 2 young girls. I got a beautiful wife I've been married to for over 10 years, and we've been together more than half our life. And I was struck down by this disgusting, gene mutation, essentially, which caused, and it apparently, so I was diagnosed with an appendix primary cancer in, it would have been around June 2022. The thing with the cancer that I had was that it was super rare. So it was 1 to 4 people in 1 million will be diagnosed in the US every year. So the chances of having this cancer are, as you can tell, very, very low. The extension of that means that the hospital system doesn't really know how to deal with it because it's so rare.
It's so rare.
So there are really only select few specialists around who understand and know the pathology, treatment options, and we found ourselves in the Logan Hospital. I had really severe chest pain. I thought it might be a heart issue. There was talk at the time, because it was 2022, COVID was just still prevalent, but we were coming out of the COVID year, 2021. And there was talk around the vaccine potentially having side effects on young adults, particularly to do with the heart.
Known cardiac issues.
Yeah, cardiac issues in particular. And that's what our initial thought was. Oh, maybe it's some kind of reaction to the vaccine. And so that was what our thinking was. It was just something wrong with the heart. I thought it might have been musculoskeletal from just being in the gym. Really thought it was nothing.
Hell.
Yeah, exactly. I thought this is nothing. Hurts a bit. It'll be over in a day or two. And so anyway, it would really be kind of unbearable pain when I was lying down. And when I would sit up, it would kind of subside. So I said to caught my wife. She said, go to the hospital right now. And I was like, no, I'll go in the morning. If it's still painful, I'll go in the morning. So that night I struggled to
typical boys, we'll be all right. You finally gained the courage to break the news to your wife that you're in pain. She's like, go to the hospital, you idiot.
Exactly. And so, the next day I woke up and I was still in pain. So I thought, fuck, I better go to the hospital. I went to the hospital. They did the tests on me. They did an ECG. They did a blood test. They did an X-ray scan of my chest, and they couldn't see anything wrong. So, basically I got told, go home, take some Panadol. If the pain persists, see your GP, and maybe get them to request or to refer you to get a echocardiogram, which is like it's like a scan, ultrasound scan on the heart, just to see if there was any abnormalities in and around the external heart muscle, the casing, which is thought to be related to the vaccine side effects. So anyway, I went home. I had the same issue that night. Woke up the next day, said, okay, I'm going to go to the GP. Went to the GP. They did the same tests, came up with nothing. They gave me a referral to go see, or to go get an echocardiograph. And I had literally gotten out of the GP, called up, set an appointment for the same day, and got in the car and was driving home. And I just felt like this overwhelming pain in my chest that I couldn't actually drive the car. So I'd called my wife and I was like, I'm struggling a bit. I think I need to go to the hospital, but I can't get there. I'm going to go home. I'm going to get an ambulance. And she was like, yeah, keep me up to date. Just go straight to the hospital. So long story short, ambulance took me to the hospital. I was put on an IV and given some fentanyl to relax the pain. And then it was a good 2 days of doctors examining me to see, what's going on.
What the hell's wrong with this guy?
Yeah, what's wrong with this guy?
He looks good,
he's
but
fit, he's young, he's healthy.
Yeah.
What the symptoms he's showing just don't correlate with anything we know or understand. So I ended up getting a CT scan on my chest, and the one thing that the doctors could pick up was some fluid on in the abdomen, like just at the bottom of the scan. So they noticed that and said, oh, that's strange, because generally like that's called ascites, which is when fluid builds up in your abdominal cavity, and generally that's a cause or a symptom of cirrhosis. And cirrhosis is usually comes about through like alcohol abuse, and it's like poor liver function. So they were like, this guy doesn't drink overly, like, you know, enjoyed a couple of drinks now and then, but I wasn't alcoholic. I was, you know, quite the opposite. In fact, I was working out every day. I was riding to and from work in the city every day. I was, you know, going on 100k rides on the weekends.
Like maybe 10 years prior, or you
might
have thought, oh,
exactly.
Okay, it could be the booze, but
yeah, in the teen years, in the binge drinking years,
but definitely
maybe.
not now.
But yeah, not now. And none of the doctors that were in the hospital knew what was going on. So they ordered another CT scan of my abdomen. They found that there was a large amount of fluid in the abdomen, and so I became a little bit of the sideshow in the hospital, where a lot of different professions and doctors would come down and check on me because I was like a unique case. And anyway, they ended up taking a tap, which is like a drain of the fluid in my abdomen, and then it was sent away for tests, and then I was allowed to go home. So I went home, and about 4 days later, I got a call from the young doctor there. He wasn't even like the main doctor. He was just, you know, one of the young guys, and he broke the news to me. Essentially, he was like, you know, I'm really sorry I have to give you this news. It's shocking, but the fluid came back as being malignant, which meant that there were malignant cancer cells in the fluid in my abdomen. And so I was like, what is that? Like, okay, I didn't really know what that meant, but I knew that it wasn't good. And he had already ordered a endoscopy and colonoscopy to be done so that they could check through with cameras down in the system to see if there was anything overt. They thought maybe like a colon cancer or something like that. And what they found was actually a tumor inside my appendix that seemed to have perforated. And it was at that point that I was referred to a colorectal specialist. And I had sought out actually a colorectal specialist through a family friend. And I had taken this information to him. He was able to explain to me what it could be. And he essentially explained that, you know, there's appendix cancers. They're extremely rare. There is a range of different pathologies here. So, you know, anywhere from like low aggressive to very high aggressive, and everything in between. So the way he explained it to me, it's like, you know, it's like an apple in an orchard. There's a lot of different brands and species, and you just got to hope that it's not the poison apple.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we're like, yeah, well, we've got a biopsy on the appendix tumor, and we're waiting to hear feedback. So anyway, through this, they determined that it was something called PMP, which is pseudomyxoma peritoniae, which is it's like a late stage of appendix cancer where it spreads to the abdominal cavity, and it excretes like a jelly kind of substance, like a mucus, and it was slowly like filling up my abdomen. And as soon as it was determined that it was PMP, I was put on. It was through the public system, so I was given to the colorectal specialists in the public system who know and understand and treat this. And we found out there's only really 3 specialists in Australia, and one of them was in the Princess Alexandria Hospital, which is close to us. So we were kind of like, that's great. He's close. We don't have to, you know, it doesn't disrupt our life.
Any good news at that
Yeah,
point
exactly.
is helpful.
So as you can imagine, like, you know, those initial weeks and months after getting a diagnosis.
What was that phone call like, man? That first phone call, like,
yeah.
Sorry, you've got malignant cancer.
Yeah, that
like,
it was hard hitting.
Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, it was. That was the moment where I was like, fuck, this is bad. And I'd called court and I told the court and Ian, that's when I think those first couple of weeks, you go through the whole, like, grieving process, I think they call it.
Mm.
But you go through the fear, you go through highly positive, because you still don't have all the information, so you're holding on to hope.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, it can't be that bad. It can't be that bad. It can't be that bad.
Yeah. This sort of shit doesn't happen to me.
Yeah, exactly. That's
the bargaining.
Yeah. You do go through that kind of bargaining, and I really tried to avoid going down the rabbit hole of like, why me? Because I know that it's as random as as winning the lottery. Like it's so random for something like this to happen in terms of your cells are mutating and splitting like every moment that you're alive, and for one to mutate in such a way that then leads to cancer it's very rare. And so I didn't look at it as like a kind of woe is me sort of situation. It was like, fuck, this shit happens. We just need to get on it now and do what we can to treat it. So both Court and my mental capacity went all into learning about this disease and learning about the treatment options, learning about like prognosis, learning about.
So you didn't run away from it. You ran towards it.
Yeah, we really did. We leant in. Like we were told, like a lot of people wouldn't ask as many questions as we had asked. Like we were asking all the questions, and we were learning as much as we could, because we figured that like the more information we had, the better equipped we were to deal with it.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be probably the saving grace. That was, we researched so hard that we found several different specialists, and
it's almost like you approached it with a degree of curiosity.
It really was. Like we were genuinely like fascinated in this whole medical world and system that we previously hadn't really had exposure to, because we were both fairly young, and the most
young, healthy.
Exactly.
Like people who have got health problems, they know a lot about health problems because they've lived through it. But people like me, I don't know anything about health problems, because I'm not a frequent flyer.
That's exactly it, and we were exactly the same. So, our I guess our introduction into the healthcare system was very abrupt, and it was a steep learning curve.
Yeah.
The most we'd had experience with it in the past was really going through having kids, right? Like Courtney being in hospital and getting surgery, and we had
for basically precisely the opposite
reason,
emotions in that you're bringing life into the world, and it's the most amazing and joyous thing that any human can go through is meeting your new child for the first time. It's just so magical. But so your experience in the hospital system was that, and then now this.
And at the time, as you can imagine, just post-COVID, the hospitals were just crazy.
Chockers.
They were chockers. Like they were understaffed. They were underfunded. There was one point in time when I was ramped when I first came into the hospital. Ramping is when you just before you get admitted to the ward or in the emergency, before you get a bed, you're sitting in a corridor essentially, ramped with the paramedics who brought you in, so they can't leave until I've handed you over to the hospital staff. And I was in this ramp situation with literally 8 other patients and 16 other paramedics who were stuck there. Instead of the paramedics being out on the street, like going out and helping people, they were stuck in this ramp situation until they could hand over their patients. So I could just see all of these horrific inefficiencies in our healthcare system at that point in time. And it was fortunate that we weren't going through this through COVID, where I had to be by myself, because I was able to bring Court and she was able to be with me through this whole process. And I guess from that experience, we found a surgeon. They had booked us in for 6 weeks to do what is called the mother of all surgeries. So the one way that they've learnt over the past 25 years to treat this, and this was actually a procedure that was invented by a guy named Dr. Sugar Baker, and it seems to be completely medieval and brutal. So because the mucin builds up in the abdominal cavity, you have to extract the mucin, and then that mucin then seeds tumours on everything it touches. So they basically have to try and go through what's called CRS, which is cytoreductive surgery. That is to remove as much cancerous cells as possible. So it's basically an open abdominal surgery where they open you up down the middle. You're open from anywhere between 5 and 15 hours, and a team of surgeons have to then essentially remove all the malignant ascites, and they have to remove all of the visible cancer, essentially, that they can see, and also any of the compromised organs. So I had my first mother of all surgeries in September of that year, so only a couple of months after being diagnosed. And that was, I think it was like an 11-hour surgery, and they closed me up, and when I came to, I was told, we got a great deal of the tumour out, but there's quite a bit left up there in and around the porta hepatis vein, in and around the liver, which they wouldn't touch, and so basically gave me like 2 years to live and said, that's all we can do for you, there'll be no more surgeries. So Court and I were kind of like,
fuck, man.
Fuck that, dude. Like, we're going to find someone else who can get this out.
That is not the answer we're looking for.
Legit. It's like, sorry, I'm not going to take that as like
this
the
is
last
not
and
how the
final.
story ends.
Yeah, exactly. So I had been doing some research. One of the beneficial aspects, I think, of social media is the formation of these community groups, these Facebook groups, and we found a Facebook group that was dedicated to this very rare cancer type. So within the group were carers and also patients or people who had
like
survivors, and a wealth of information came from that. So we engaged in that group. We got word of this professor who's operating out of Sydney, St George Hospital. His name's David Morris, and he's like one of 6 globally recognized leaders in this cancer, in this, like, as a surgical oncologist. He's like right up there. He trained at the school where Sugar Baker had pioneered the procedure in England, and he'd been practicing for a good 15 years on top of the surgeon who he went with here in Queensland. So we sent all of our scans to Professor Morris. He had a look at them and basically said, yeah, like, do your 6 months chemo or whatever because after I'd completed my first surgery, they said you'll be on maintenance chemo for life. And I had to wait to recover a little bit after that surgery to then start chemo, because chemo is another round of like completely fucking you over.
Yeah.
Like
getting nuked.
Yeah, it's the worst. I think it was like probably worse than the surgery. And
so you would rate the chemotherapy process worse than that surgery and that post-surgery rehab?
Yeah, for sure. At least for me. I know many different people react differently to the chemo drugs, and there's an array of drugs, but once again, because the cancer is so rare, they treat it in the oncology space as colon cancer. So they use the same concoctions of chemotherapy to attack colon cancer. They use that for appendix cancer, even though the efficacy rates are like 20% or something, which is shithouse. So yeah, we were told you got 2 years to live. You're going to go on chemo for the rest of your life. I had quite a lot of organs removed at that point. I had a right hemicolectomy, so the right side of my large colon was taken. I had majority of my small intestine was left. I'd take what they do is they peel the peritoneal lining, which is the sac that holds all the organs together. That was removed because that's quite absorbs quite a lot of the disease and the tumor. And surprisingly, that thing grows back. They don't know how, but apparently there's research into learning
just
how.
rebuilds.
Yeah, it's like a reptile, man. Like it regrows its tail.
Isn't it amazing?
It's incredible. So that was taken out the first time, and I did have quite a bit of my rectum was also removed. So I was left with a stoma, which is a colonoscopy, not a colonoscopy, sorry, like a colostomy, which essentially means like my large intestine, or what's left of it, is connected to my stomach. So I have to, from now on, I have to wear a bag and a device to, do number 2 in, essentially. So that changes. Yeah, for the rest of my life. It's like, but that at the time was the least of my concerns. It was kind of like
staying alive.
Like that's the main thing. So thankfully, court and I were, hard in our conviction and sought a second opinion. David Morris saw my scans and he was like, do 3 months of chemo, he said, and then we'll look at the scans and see how it is and make it determine what the next steps are. I lasted 2 rounds of chemo. So chemo's every 2 weeks. So I needed 3 months, would have been 6 rounds of chemo. I lasted 2 rounds of chemo. The first round I got a small bowel obstruction. So they couldn't determine if it was the chemo reaction to, or the tumor reacting to the chemo and then like pinching the small intestine, so no food could pass, or gas, or liquid. And so I had to go back into hospital a couple of weeks out of my first surgery. And that was another point where it was kind of like, you could die. Small bowel obstructions are not they're not a small issue. It's like if you can't eat and absorb nutrients, then you're toast. And the way that they treat small bowel obstructions is to actually starve you and hope that your body will just
push it through.
Yeah, push whatever's in there left through. So you get what's called like a nasal gastric tube. So the tube goes up your nose and into your stomach, and basically all of the bile that your stomach creates to help process food comes out the straw. So you're not actually putting any pressure on the obstruction. On the obstruction, exactly. So thankfully, my obstruction passed after like 6 days, and that was kind of another little yay win. We'll take whatever win we can get. And by this stage, after 2 rounds of chemo, after having the big mother of all surgeries, and then after having a small bowel obstruction, I was down to, I think, like 69 kilos. I was like very weak. I had little to no body mass on me.
I remember seeing photos of you and I was like, man, you were like a skeleton of your, of yourself.
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly it happens too, without access to food and water. Like, well, you're getting fluids through IV, so that's okay.
Yeah.
But
everything else just fades away.
Yeah. The atrophy, like, what do they call it? Atrophy.
Yeah.
The muscle just starts to waste away. And anyway, again, like that didn't really concern me too much. My main concern was.
What, your concern wasn't vanity at that point?
Yeah, no, not at all. But yeah, it was really getting myself to a position where I would be accepted for a second surgery.
Yeah. And
so we worked closely with Professor Morris, and thankfully, he gave us the okay. And by it would have been December or November that same year. So really only.
So this has all been over a fairly short period of time.
Extremely short period.
September. Now we're talking November. So all this bullshit has happened over the course of like 2 or 3 months.
Yes. So my surgery, diagnosis was in July. First surgery was in September. Bowel obstruction like October, and then accepted to see Professor Morris for a second surgery in November. And the mother of all surgeries, they say you need at least 12 months to recover from before having another. Like they don't even consider having another. It's like meant to be like one and done. And so I was basically looking at a second surgery within 6 months of my first surgery. And at that point in time, I was kind of like, if a surgery is available to me, I'm going to take it. Like you said, eliminate
certain failure.
Eliminate certain failure, my friend. Exactly. And I guess that's one aspect of some of the topics in your book that really did hit home with me. Is I could relate like on that level, and although it might not be like financial, it's still these characteristics that
it's logical.
Yeah, characteristics that get you through tough times. And I found a lot of strength in stoicism, in reading books and wisdom of people, not particularly who had gone through what I was going through, but people who had gone through other types of adversity and used certain tools and techniques. I think his name is Dr. Stultz. There was a Netflix documentary that Jonah Hill did with his therapist, who was a guy called Dr. Stultz, and he had also had a lot of great lessons that reminded me of some of the lessons in your book, particularly in around identifying, the fact that you only have certain things that are within your control. So, try not to worry about things that are outside of your control so much.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I think it was, so I was down in Sydney now over Christmas time, just before Christmas. I met with Professor Morris. I got admitted to the hospital. I was severely malnourished, and he told me to stop chemo because the chemo was literally killing me, faster than if I wasn't on the chemo, faster than what tumor was left inside. And I ended up when you go through chemotherapy, it just smashes your white blood cell count. So if you've got a really low white blood cell count, that means your immune system is just fucked. You can't fight infections.
So everything you get really sick from.
Yeah, that's right. Everything you get really sick from, and they don't operate on people who are neutropenic, which is when you're severely lacking in neutrophils and white blood cells. So I was neutropenic, and they were kind of like, we can't operate on you. And I was like, fuck, how do I get not neutropenic? Let's just get to this surgery. And they said, look, we're going to let you out over Christmas. And that was fantastic. I had my mum and dad, my brother, and my mum and dad-in-law, Court's parents, and her sister and brother all came down to Sydney, and we had Christmas in Sydney. So next to the hospital is this cancer accommodation. It's called Bazina House. And we just kind of rolled into Bazina House, which was, it's nice to have access to a facility next to the hospital so close. But, it's a really small 1-bedroom unit. It's pretty fucking dire. And that if you're there, you're on the way out. It's pretty fucked.
A bit deathly.
A bit deathly. So
and it was Christmas time.
So Court took it upon herself to hire an Airbnb down in the, I can't remember what was the beach called. It was down near, I can't remember what the exact place was called, but it was a really nice kind of beachy house location. It was big enough for us all to stay in, and we stayed there for 4 or 5 nights over Christmas. So, we were treating that as potentially the last Christmas, and it was, we're making it really nice, and it was great for us all to be together, but still the shadow of why we were there was, over everyone's head. And I found it kind of I wanted everyone to feel comfortable. I didn't want everyone to just be constantly thinking about why we're there and the reasons that we're here and stuff. So
yeah.
Anyway, I feel as though my mindset, I needed to have a good mindset so that I could help the people around me who were going through this.
Exactly.
Cope.
And that's that. And sometimes it's hard. Well, I won't say harder, but it's hard to watch someone go through so much suffering. You wish you could take some of it off them, and you just say, just let me have the cancer, just even for a day, so you can have a good day. But you can't.
No, that's it. You can't, and it is what it is. So through this process, I think that was the scariest time was definitely those first 6 months. So had the surgery, had the chemo, had the blockage, got okayed for the next surgery, became neutropenic, and then my surgery date was meant to be something like the 4th or 5th of January or something like that. And I got fucking COVID. Dude, I got COVID. And so COVID rocked me. And then I found out through the lovely nurses, and I say that genuinely, they're fucking amazing, these nurses. but they unfortunately had to give me the bad news that because I contracted COVID, I couldn't get surgery for 7 weeks minimum. So I was like, man, this.
So you're all geared up to get surgery.
Yeah.
Fucking
I was mentally
coronavirus, and then
I was a shell of a human at this point as well. So in retrospect, I came back home. We came back home. We just flew back home. We're like, fuck, let's go back home. Wait for 2 months for the surgery date. And in retrospect, it actually turned out to be really good because within that 2 months being off chemo, I actually gained some weight, and I started like feeling good and.
Started feeling a bit more normal.
Yeah, started feeling a bit more normal, and like it was almost like those couple of months were good for me to get prepared physically for another surgery.
Yeah.
So now I think back, I think maybe
it was all for the best.
Yeah, exactly. I might not have been able to last the
God
surgery
bless
the
COVID.
first time. Yeah. It's like that Chinese adage, of the farmer. And have you heard that one? Like, the horse comes onto the farmer's field, and he's like, everyone around him is like, oh, look, there's a horse on the field. How lucky. And he's like, we'll see. And so they captured the horse and, put it in his, in the barn or whatever. And then the next day the son tried to break in the horse, and then the son fell off and broke his arm. And, everyone was like, oh no, your son broke his arm, how horrible. And the farmer was like, we'll see. And then, the emperor came through with his war machine the next day and was asking for all of the able-bodied men to join his campaign, and they couldn't take the farmer's son because he had a broken leg, and I guess the adage is just that, like, things are going to happen outside of control. Like, they might be good, they might be bad, we don't know. So you'll see. Yeah. And
and you never know until later.
Yeah, exactly. You will never know until later, like whether it was good or bad.
Yeah, exactly.
And so anyway, I came back. I was able to do some stuff around the house, like get the house. We were doing some yard work in the back, so like I laid some turf and
started feeling useful again.
Yeah, started feeling useful again because
you were a liability for those last few months, weren't you?
And that was the hardest part as well. I think, like being, I guess, a key source of income and support for the family when you're flat on your back and just completely invalid.
And especially when you're a man.
And especially when you're a man, yeah, exactly. You just feel like your value is like nil.
We're notoriously horrible patients.
Yes, exactly. And seeing, it actually made me see like how much we fill our lives with, just stuff. Just we do stuff for the sake of doing stuff. Like I really struggled just to get out of bed and go to the breakfast table in the morning, but I made it like one of my things is that I will get my ass out of bed. I will never eat in bed. I will sit at the table and I'll eat with my family. And over time, just being able to do the dishes was like a fucking big win. It was like, fuck yes. I'm doing something.
Most people they fucking cleaning the dishes. Oh, fucking
exactly.
I don't want to be doing this, but you were just like, hell yeah, I can do something.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy how like your perspective just flips. And so I was able to get my second surgery in March of 2023, and the second surgery was like a 20-hour surgery, but the outcome of that surgery was that I was left with a few less organs. So I've got about 3 meters of small bowel left and about 30 centimeters of large bowel, which is enough to survive. I think my nutrient intake is 70% of what a normal person would be, which, not bad. Like, it means it's easier for me to maintain a reasonable weight without watching too much on what I eat. Mm-hmm. I do try to eat healthy, but like I don't do added sugar. But at the same time, I won't say no to
a treat every so often.
Yeah, exactly. You still got to live. Mm-hmm. So after that second surgery, I was back at square one. It was like back being an invalid, but this time it was much more protracted because it was more invasive. It was my second and 6-month period, and they needed to apply some biomesh to hold my abdominal wall together because it was like paper thin by the time they'd finished clearing all the cancer cells out. And the good news was that they gave me a completeness of cytoreduction score, it's CC, and it goes from 0 to 3, 0 being absolutely nothing left, 3 being,
Still riddled.
still a lot more. Like I think 3 is tumours over 5 millimeters or something. So
yeah.
I got given a 1, and only because they couldn't 100% guarantee that they had removed all of the visible disease, because at that point I'd had scar tissue and other bits and pieces that just made it really
hard to differentiate between scar tissue and tumour.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So another thing about the mother of all surgeries is that the second part of, like, after the cytoreduction component is intraperitoneal HIPEC, which is heated chemotherapy that they pump in as when you're open. And so they put the chemotherapy in and they literally swish it around. Like, there's nurses that their job is to swish it around.
Like sort of push it around to the different parts.
Yeah, massage it in, make sure it gets to all the bits. And because I had disease left in my first surgery that they couldn't get, they aborted the HIPEC component. Just didn't see it as, like, it's meant to attack the microscopic, not the macroscopic disease. And the second time round, I was able to get the HIPEC. So I was like stoked, because I got some direct chemo into the area where I didn't before. And the professor does this thing called EPIC, which is, it's kind of, it's EPIC. So HIPEC is kind of inter-operational delivery. So as they're operating, they deliver it. And the EPIC, once they've stitched you up, they have like some pipes that they have in you, so they can pump cold chemo in and then draw it out the other side. So they do that for up to 5 days following the surgery. So for the first, I could withstand 4, and the prof said to me that there's no clinical data to suggest that 5 is better than 4. So I got to
5 is a full course. If you get to 4, then
exactly.
That's pretty good.
So I'd gone through like the HIPEC, I'd gone through 4 stages of EPIC, and then I was back to this recovery bed in hospital. And this time in hospital, my recovery was more protracted because I had a few complications. Like there was something like 5 resections of the bowel, so that means I had to cut 5 different sections out and then stitch them back together. So each one of those becomes like weaker and has potential for error, be it opening up or be it getting an infection on the actual stitching itself. So I had a few complications through hospital, which kept me in hospital for about 7 weeks. And like that was probably the lowest I'd got, was being in a hospital bed for 7 weeks, like on what's called TPN. So when they do invasive open abdominal surgery, your digestive system goes to sleep and it doesn't wake up until it's ready to wake up. So, many times in this surgery, like for a week or sometimes longer, you need to go on what's called TPN, which is total parenteral nutrition, and that's food that's essentially injected into your veins. So you can, I didn't even know that you could do this, but you can extract nutrients from this liquid food through your venous system, which is pretty amazing. So that was, I couldn't eat for 7 weeks. So I was literally watching every food documentary show, just
you were just craving,
starving. I was like, if my stomach is ever, if my digestion tract is ever going to wake up, it's going to be because I'm watching this food and I'm forcing it to want it. That was my that was my rationale.
And it obviously worked.
Yeah, and it worked. I was famished by the end of it, but yeah, I got to eat again, which again is like a huge step in the right direction. I could see
like the ability to eat. Jeez.
Yeah, like it's crazy until you really lose having access to something. Like you don't understand how much you rely on it and how important it is to your mental health, really. And
so as we currently sit, you're basically only about 1 year out of hospital at this current moment, because that was March 2023. And you were there for 7 more weeks, so you would have been discharged May or
just probably late April.
late April.
Yeah.
So, and
Early
here we are
May.
in May
Yep.
of 2024. So this is still fresh.
Yeah, man, it's very fresh. And in fact, since coming home, I was lucky enough to come home just before my birthday, so I could have my birthday at home with my girls. Because another hard part about it was that Courtney and I were away from our daughters for the entirety of that 7-week period while I was in hospital for the second surgery. So that was props to Courtney, because she was my main carer. She had to come down with me and support me through that process, and we'd actually relied heavily on Court's mum and dad to look after the kids and look after the house. So eternally grateful for everything. I mean,
life is just hard enough anyway.
Exactly.
Life is, especially when you've got young kids, and adding this on top of it, man, how the fuck did you do it?
Well, to be honest, all I could do was continue moving forward, and not lamenting or dwelling, because someone said to me through this process, I think it was maybe through the Facebook group, worrying about tomorrow robs us of today.
Yeah.
And I might have got a CC score of 1, but recurrence is highly likely, almost 100% going to happen at some point. It could be next year, it could be 5 years, it could be 10 years, it could be 20 years.
Yeah.
So,
So this is not going away.
No, this is not going away.
You are never going to be fully recovered.
Yes, that's right. It's they
and you are
said to me,
permanently disfigured, and you are never going to be living a normal life.
That's right. At least not as normal as it was before. This is what we call a new normal now that I'm living.
Yeah.
And at the very start of this whole process, when I was talking to the first colorectal surgeon who was informing us about what we were facing, he said, you're not going to live to be an old man, best case scenario. So, you are handed a death sentence, or at least a very much shortened life sentence. And that's kind of something you have to deal with, unless it just consumes you.
Yeah.
And the idea of utilizing every kind of moment that I have available now is I look at every day that I have as a bonus. It's every day I have beyond that second surgery is it's bonus time. I'm living in bonus time. And I feel like I actually am able to be, it's very strange, because there's a certain liberation that happens when you get handed a death sentence. It's kind of all the other minutiae and all the other inconsequential things in your life just evaporate. It's kind of you immediately know what's important and you know what's not important. And then your focus becomes on, obviously in my instance, it's the kids. I want to be around long enough for them to know who I am, and I want to make sure that while I'm here, I'm doing a good job to instill a good memory that they will have, as they grow up. And there are many lessons. There's a few in your book that, like I said, really did resonate with me, and I really just came to believe that if I don't get on with my life and live my life, then I'm going to lose what time I have left. And to me, that's the most illogical, just stupid option. And I don't think it is an option. I think it's, I might as well go out back and put myself down now and be done with it. But instead, I wanted to get back on my bike. And, I think it was within the Tour de France is in July. I was in bed bound watching the Tour de France, and I was like, fuck yeah, I get to watch the Tour de France. I've never had time to watch the fucking whole thing. It's ridiculous. It's 21 days, stage races, the races are massive, and I could just enjoy every minute of it. And I was loving life at that point. And then I was kind of fuck, these guys are gnarly. I need to get back on my bike. And so when the Tour de France finished, I was like, yep, this is it. Got back on my bike and started doing some short rides. And from there kind of, built up to 50K. Like I said, that's probably where I'm sitting at in terms of my distance. And I started swimming again. So getting in the pool and stretching out the midsection. And I don't know why, but we place these kind of little benchmarks or goals that we aim towards. And my goal was to not be off work longer than 12 months. So September of last year, I was like, I'm going to be back at work by September. And I have a really good relationship with my boss. He's like, I consider him more a friend than a boss. And Courtney too, we both work for the same company. So Courtney's been there for 13 years. I'll be going on 5, this will be my 6th year. And my boss said to me, look, we'd love to have you back in any capacity that you're ready. And
how good's that?
yeah, it's amazing. Like, it was, I realized that not a lot of people have that opportunity. And
so you went back to work in September?
Yeah, last year. Yeah, I went back to
1
work
year?
2 days a week after my first surgery.
This is 1 year from the first surgery?
Yeah.
Shit, man.
And it wasn't like, it was like you said, it wasn't like we needed to financially. Like we had a really good GoFundMe campaign, which was just wild. And in my job, I had, a lot of rolling commissions still coming in from the year prior. I'd had a really good year prior. And, I had a little bit of work cover through my super, but financially we were fine. It was more so the fact that I needed to get back to being a contributing member of the group.
Exactly. You needed to be of service.
Yeah, I needed to be of service, and I needed to play my part in the family, which is, to be a provider and to be an example for my kids that, you can't let adversity hold you down, because...
So you have got every excuse in the book, and valid excuses too, to just sit back and go, yeah, from what I've had, there's no coming back from this. But you rejected that idea. That was not going to be
not at all
how your story ended.
No, I might as well be dead. Like, there's no difference to me than giving up and sitting back and, just being lazy and, taking from, like, sapping from any and every source around you. Like, that's not living. That's definitely not. It's not even an option in my, my mindset. It's kind of like, I need to be living, and living for me is working. It's providing. It's using the time I have with the kids maybe more efficiently and like more, more targeted in terms of like, what are we going to do to make memories? So yeah, it's I guess from the outside in, it looks pretty horrid, but from my point of view looking out, from my point of view looking out, like I said, this is bonus time I have. So like,
it's like you're playing a game and you've been given another life.
Yeah, got another life. I got like the bonus life.
Man. Well, so moving into this sort of middle section of the book, we, I talk about suffering, and that if you want to achieve anything remarkable in this life, suffering will be mandatory. Because if it's something that you haven't suffered through, or if you haven't suffered enough through, then it's not worthwhile. And it's not worthwhile for the pure reason that if you had suffered a little bit more, if you endured, if you just squeezed that little bit more out of yourself, you would have been a much greater version of yourself. And for you, man, I cannot fathom the suffering that you have endured. I just cannot. That from that first phone call to the going under for the first time in these foreign surgeries that are so bloody rare that they only happen to between 1 and 4 out of every million people. There's almost no one in the world that knows anything about it. The uncertainty, and just you were given 2 years after the first surgery, and then so the kind of suffering that I talk about in this book is nothing in comparison to that. You've definitely one-upped me there. But I guess the suffering that I've endured, aside from the usual business and financial and the physical challenges, my history of drug abuse, everything like that. It's mostly been voluntary. But beyond that, I've sort of emerged from the wreckage with a new, I guess, strategy, and that is called suffering for success. And I talk about running a lot in the book, particularly endurance running. And I don't consider myself to be an elite athlete. I'm a weekend warrior at best. I'm probably on the sort of more impressive end of the weekend warriors, but still, in no way a professional athlete. I run maybe close to 80 kilometers per week. I generally do 3 runs on a Wednesday morning, a Friday morning, and then a Sunday. I'll generally do about 23 kilometers on a Wednesday, another 23 kilometers on a Friday, and normally somewhere between 30 and 35 kilometers on a Sunday. And when I talk about all of this running that I do and everything like that, it's people sort of say to me like, "Man, you must really love running." There's a lot of positives that do come of it, but I don't run because I want to run. I run for precisely the opposite reason, that I don't want to run. I run because running is a form of self-induced prolonged suffering that gives you higher degrees of mental fortitude, so that when life does fuck you over and something does come out of nowhere and real suffering is going to be part of that, you're better equipped to handle it. Maybe if, heaven forbid, something like this ever happens to me, maybe the running will give me the mental fortitude to deal with it in the same way that you've dealt with it.
I absolutely attribute all of the training that I'd done from 30 to 35 to being equipped to deal with, like, not only the physical side of recovery after surgery, but absolutely the mental side. It's like you said, there's something about testing your grit when you do an endurance sport. You're not, like, unless you're an elite, obviously, or a professional, like, you're not racing other people. You're racing yourself. And you're trying to be the best version of yourself. You're trying to, we're trying to find ways to push our bodies to the limit, or to our limit, without being silly. But there's certainly a sense of power in that, and in knowing that, in your example, if you needed to, you could run away from literally anyone, and no one could catch you. Or
I get asked a lot. Is like, because I do a lot of running it when it's pitch black, 3 a.m., 4 a.m. Through some pretty dodgy parts of town, and people are like, "Aren't you scared that someone's just going to come and jump you one day, Bryce?" I'm like, "They'll have to catch me first." And if I'm out there and I'm planning on jumping someone, I'm not targeting the skinny guy that's running at 4 minutes 20 per k down the beach. I'm like, I'm letting him go. I'm just like,
yeah, exactly.
Fuck that. I'm not robbing that guy today.
Yeah.
So there is that benefit that comes from it. But I do want to let's weave into the next chapter, which is chapter 6, never start over. And I think this is really highly relevant, because you just touched on there is like you're trying to squeeze that little bit more out of yourself, trying to squeeze more out of life, and a lot of people, and I spoke about this fairly recently at an event, and we're talking about richness, and one of the gentlemen said that richness is about contentment. And I thought, I was like, okay, that's pretty interesting, but we need to be careful with contentment and with happiness too, because I believe happiness is a trap, and I think contentment, if contentment means plateauing, I see plateauing in life as a form of regress. With everything that I do in life, whether it's running, whether it's business, whether it's working towards any goal, I am obsessed with the idea of small but manageable, incremental, unwavering progress. I'm always trying to push myself at about 105%. So if whatever I'm doing, if 100% is comfortable, then I'm always just nudging that a little bit higher, 105%, because that's both manageable, and over time you're going to get this compounding exponential growth in whatever it is you're doing, whether it's investing or increasing the mileage for your when you're running or cycling or swimming. But if you go too hard, if you're trying to push 200% of your capacity constantly, you are going to burn out. And you'll fuck yourself up, and you'll be done. You will burn yourself out, and you'll actually end up regressing to levels far beneath where you even were. It's the whole thing becomes counterproductive. So when I talk about happiness or contentment or just being comfortable in life, to me, being comfortable is not performing at 100% of your capabilities. It's at constantly aiming for that 105%, just in whatever it is that you're doing. But also on top of that, when life fucks you over and something happens to you, and quite often these are things that are beyond your control and that you could never anticipate, Exhibit A, you are going to get knocked back to a certain level. And wherever that level is, you need to, you can't just start again from that level. You need to try to get back to where you were before you failed. Because what happens to a lot of people is that they start making good progress in whatever it is that they're doing, then something happens, and then they're back to square one again, and then they start progressing at that same level again, but they never actually advance because they're being knocked back to, that original level. When life fucks you over and you get knocked down to, say, 80% of where you once were, your strategy needs to be to relentlessly pursue that pre-decimation baseline. Now, in your particular case, it's going to be hard for you to get to 100% of your pre-cancer fitness level, for instance. But and if it's even possible to measure mental fortitude, you now need to be focusing on the things that you can excel in, and your outlook on life now, even just the way that you rejected the 2-year prognosis, this attitude that you have about being in bonus time and everything like that. I mean, this is like mental fortitude that is hard to achieve even if you don't have cancer. Like, how the fuck did you how did you get to this sort of unwavering mental development and fortitude whilst going through all of this?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, it was really necessity. Backed into a corner and told fight or die. It's kind of like you got to make a decision. And I think a lot of it was through, reading Stoicism, books of that nature. And it almost felt like all of that work that I was doing before cancer in, the endurance sport and the triathlons was almost in preparation for the event.
Yeah.
It was almost like I was training for those 5 years for the event, which was...
And you think there is absolutely no chance you could have faced it the way that you faced it if it wasn't for that conditioning beforehand?
I definitely think it wouldn't have been at all the same, for sure. There's certain things you learn about yourself when you do put yourself through suffering, as you say. That fortitude, that resilience, those are kind of things that are developed, I think. And some people develop it through like going to war and being a soldier and experiencing what they experience and then developing that fortitude. Some people get it from, operating at a high level at whatever profession it might be that they're doing. They can, professional athletes, great example. There's a couple of golfers that come to mind who have gone through career-ending events and coming back and, slotting back in at that level that you say is like equal to, if not greater than, where they were previously. I just think it's got a lot to do with like we've been saying this whole time, is you've got one thing that you can control in this world, and it's your mind and it's your perspective. And if you don't like the thing that's in front of you, change your perspective of insert thing, and reality changes with it. And you, like you said, like the neural networks, it's very hard to say quit smoking, for example, overnight, but it doesn't mean it's not impossible. Like if you believe that it's possible, then it is possible. And I think we're really only limited by the limitations that we place on ourselves. Like you can only really get as high as you think you can get.
Yeah.
A lot to be said for that kind of changing your perspective on something. And the way I did it was like, okay, I've been dealt a shit hand, but I need to play the hand I've been dealt.
Yeah.
And I'm going to play it by not seeing it as a complete and utter dead end. It's going to be, okay. Someone said, I think it was Confucius said, you've got two lives, and the second begins once you know the first is the only one it's the only one you have. Something along those lines. But there's a lot of truth to that, because this is obviously a wake-up call saying you do only have one life, and I feel like my whole perception on life changed through this experience for the better. It's like something good came out of this terrible experience. And to be honest, I feel like I can experience happiness more because it feels like it's earned, and it's fleeting, and it's like, it's bonus time. So it's a strange feeling. And when I say, it's liberating, you kind of, you let go of a lot of the things that were holding you back previously. And I think a lot of what your book does is tries to teach people to do exactly that, is kind of, reject things that,
that are not helpful.
That are not helpful, exactly. And unpopular, popular reasons that you touch on, and they're like oftentimes are not helpful, and you let go of them. And then you can change your mindset, and then you can proceed. And if you, my perception of success also changed. Like I was on a very corporate, ladder that I was climbing. And when I came back to work, I realized that, I don't need to be dealing with office politics and, tit for tat, kind of like it's. I'm not going into office to go to war with my colleagues to try and, vie for position and power and status. It's more so like about now, like I said, making sure that I'm giving the girls as much of me so they remember me when they're older, and trying to impart the lessons that I've learnt through this experience on others as well. So I definitely still am super driven individual. Like I still have those desires to succeed at whatever it is I'm doing. But I also know that if I do have a limited amount of time, then I don't want to be spending 5-6 days a week focusing on progressing a career that's going to amount to, potentially nothing, because I'll be dead in 5 years, So yeah, it's I think it really is just the mindset thing, and it's so powerful because like I can sit here and we can have this conversation, and I can live my life relatively normally.
Well, one of the things that brought me so much joy is, because I actually spend far more time on Strava than any other social media app. I do a little bit of stuff on social media, but not much. But I feel like I really get to know people through their Strava. So Strava, if you don't know, it's like an app that you can it tracks all of your fitness stats, you know, does all sports, running, cycling, all that sort of stuff. And it shows the amount of kilometers that you're, you know, running or cycling, how fast you're doing it, your heart rate. It's got all the stats there. So I feel that I really get to know people more through their Strava account than through Facebook or Instagram or any other social media platform, just from monitoring their fitness movements. And when I started seeing Hoani Barker showing up on my Strava feed, I was just like, fuck yeah. Like I didn't even know how you were doing. Like I hadn't spoken to you ages, but I saw you. I'm like, he's out running, he's out cycling. I'm like, that says to me, you know, more than anything you could say about how you're feeling and what your mindset is. You're back out there getting after it, and yeah, that's you know, that's progress to me.
Yeah,
that is unwavering yet incremental progress, because we were talking before off camera when you were saying that you are not going to be, so 50Ks is your new 100Ks.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, you'd like to be going out. You actually are going to go out and do a 100K bike ride in the next couple of months. You were telling me. So you're not going to push it that hard.
Won't be going for a PB. It'd be like
won't be going for a PB,
complete.
But yeah, just because of your physical state, your vessel, you've got a new 100%. And to me, you've got every fucking excuse in the planet to be doing none of it. Like for most people that have gone through what you've been through, 0% would be the new 100%. But you're still pushing, you're still getting after it, and man, that just says a lot. Like I feel like we don't even need to talk about these chapters because you're an example of the ideas that must be rejected and the alternative ideas that must be accepted. This cancer, this unfair thing, this tragic thing that happened to you, you have rejected the idea that is going to be, you know, that it's going to be how you will be defined and how you will be remembered as a man, as a husband, as a father. You're now using this new time, this bonus time, as you're talking about it, to really craft a legacy, and it will not be of a cancer survivor. It will be of someone who achieved remarkable things despite it all.
Yeah, absolutely. Nailed it.